Okay, so I today want to talk about, this story I feel like isn't necessarily a shitless story. Like, I'm not like mad about it. I'm not mad at anybody about it, but I think it's a really good example of, how people can act against their own interests. Because we see this all the time. Like, we see people get emotional, right? Wouldn't you say? We see people take off their thinking hats and just get
people can act shitty. That doesn't mean they're a shitty person.
No, for sure. Yeah. And
when you're selling your home and
Yeah.
there's so much pressure on you, it brings out the worst in you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit more than I normally do, just because I really think the timeline and the price points in this conversation matter for like the purpose of the story. But like, this is the perfect highlight of how people can act against their own interests. Right. All right. So just bear with me here. Let me get to the notes. So I'm working with the buyers in this situation. These are my buyers, and we're looking for a product in this case that's in just under $600K. They fall in love. Like, I'm talking about, they went back to this property like upwards of 3 times before we even talked about writing an offer. The property at this point is priced at $590,000. They fall in love. They're like, hey, we want to write an offer. And they come in and they write an offer. It is a low ball, but they come in at like $560. So we're at $590 list price. They come in at $560. You're always going to have this. You're going to have people that feel like they have to lowball something in order to get like a good deal, right? So fine, that's fine. Everybody comes across this in real estate. We write up the offer and we go in. The listing agent who receives this offer, $30,000 below asking, freaks out, cannot handle the fact that we've come in 30K below asking, which is like, I know you don't love it. I don't love getting lowballed on my listings, but it happens. You just have to manage it. She takes it to her sellers. They absolutely hate it. They literally said, go away. That was their response to our offer. And it should have been like, thank you. We'll consider it and we'll come back to you. Anyway, they say go away. They don't want to deal with us. And my buyers verbally signal, okay, fine, we'll go to $575. Nope, we're done. We don't want to talk to you. Go away. That they maintain that as their kind of like stance. So obviously no deal, nothing comes together. We're not even at the table anymore. Like, we're not even talking to each other at this point, and we go away.
Yeah, which happens all the time, but just in this case, everyone really did hate each other.
Yeah.
Right from the start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone just went to like high emotion and like just go away, like just really fast.
Yeah.
Really fast.
I remember, and even the agent on the other side was taking a lot of that, rage on towards you.
Yeah, that's
she
right.
tried to keep it cool, but there was still like, every time she interacted with you, there was some emotion there.
There was not a cool head in the room.
Yeah.
There was not a cool head in the room. Okay, so we're at 560. We get shut down, go away. 1 month later, the property gets reduced to 579, right? So now I see the price reduction, and I'm pretty excited for my buyers because they're only $4,000 above where my buyer said that they would want to buy the property at, right? So I call them up. I'm like, hey, I know things didn't go well last time, but like, this thing is in reach. You can actually get it now. And one of the parties who was like totally in love with this property was like on board, ready to go, maybe come in at 575. But the second party at this point, their feelings were so hurt. And again, they brought emotion to the negotiating table. So they're coming at it like, no, we hate the seller. They need to give us our due. And they're like coming at it in a way that's so emotional. So again, they lowball the seller at 550. We're at 579. They come in at 550. So now again, we're $30,000 apart. Not an unbridgeable gap, right? We see this gap all the time. What does the seller do? They accept our offer, and that's the end of this story, right, Greg? No. No, they, again, will not count back. They absolutely refuse. They tell us to go away, and they won't talk to us. Like, they flat out will not talk to us. Okay, that's fine. So fast forward this whole thing to like 2 months later. And again, I'm just giving you these numbers because I really want you guys to see where this thing lands, because it's ridiculous what ends up happening in the end. But We came in at 550. No, they don't take it. They tell us to go away. 2 months later, they reduce their price again to 559. So at this point, obviously, I don't call the buyers. Like at this point, I have been questioning their authenticity and their desire to actually act and do something. And I said the same thing to the listing agent. Like, I'm like, you better figure out if this, if your people actually want to sell, because we are talking, reasonable talk, and it's not happening. Buyers call me up. They're like, hey, Patricia, pretty please, this is the time. We still love the property. Write up the offer for us. And I'm like, okay, all right. Maybe we had some bad experiences. 3 times a charm. Let's write it up. What do you guys want to go in at? They are at 559. My people say, I'm thinking like, they're going to come in close to that 550 mark where they landed last time. They come in at 525. So again, we're like just about $30,000 apart. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, am I in the twilight zone right now? What's happening? Why am I going through this? Like, why are we going back and doing this over and over again? And so, obviously I prepared them for the fact that you guys are in a pissing contest. Like, you're no longer in a negotiation. You're just in a pissing contest with the seller at this point.
And, empathy to the listing agent, who probably was a huge handful on the other side.
Well,
and,
clearly, yeah.
with her, it was a shifting market. They were chasing the market down.
Yes, big time.
It didn't know where it was going to bottom out. And that's, like, obviously your clients thought it was much lower.
Yeah.
But that's a tough position, because they're going to be continuing. They're not getting what they want. They keep are at their top dollar when the market has obviously told them it's lower.
Yeah, every single time. So 559, we come in at 525. We get told to go to hell yet again for a third time. 2 months later, they reduce their price to 519. My buyers beg to write an offer at 499. So once again, we're still 20K apart. It doesn't happen. But here's the silver. So at the end of the day, this property sold for $512,000. And like, to me, it just blows my mind, because they started,
not to your people.
And not to my people. Yeah, they didn't get it. They started at 590. They sold for 512. And at every single point in this negotiation, they had the opportunity to negotiate with us and sell for more. And then, like, kind of the flip side from my buyer's perspective, at the end of this whole process, they ended up getting a place for $680 because there was nothing else on the market that was priced like this. So they ended up having to go above their budget to get their place. So, like, to me, this is the perfect example of people acting totally unreasonably and against their best interest.
Yeah. And these kinds of negotiations happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do.
The part about this particular contract negotiation was that the listing agent was probably over her skis a little bit. And because every time you counted, yes, you're insulted, but they would just, flip the contractual bird back to us. Like, there was no...
Every time.
They would not want to deal.
Yeah.
Just so insulted because they have the greatest house, they have the greatest property or townhouse ever made, and no one was acknowledging it. And I'm sure they put a lot of work into it, but, they could have got so close. Like, Patricia, I know how you act. You can get your people up if you think it's a good deal for them. But they just closed down, shut down on negotiations.
Everybody kept shutting down and acting outside of their best interest. Okay, so that's the groundwork. That's the framework. And so I want to kind of highlight this. So the year that this is happening, I think it's about 2019. So I did about 56 deals this year. So I'm not even like in rookie mode, right? Like, it's not like I don't know what to say. It's not like I don't know how to have a conversation with our clients. We're doing the get reals. If you know me, if you've been to any of my coaching, any of my training, you know that the get real conversation is huge for me. But it was just like, and I see people act against their best interest all the time, but I've never seen it to such a degree where I'm literally watching, this ridiculous zigzag of people just fighting with each other for no reason.
Yeah, so why, you can't control what the seller does, but you can control what your buyer, like, why did you even keep going with someone that was being so unreasonable at the time?
Yeah, for sure. And like, I did have moments of like wondering, like, are these guys serious? Do they have genuine motivation? And one thing, like, I always think of the 4 key power stats, right? So for me, it's about, purchase power, motivation, time frame, and whether or not they've got another agent, right? So that's always something that I'm coming back to is my 4 key power stats. And that was the crazy thing. So number 1, I had a buyer's contract with these people.
Right.
And so, I had a duty and an obligation to them, but also I knew that they were like committed to working with me, and they were committed to the process of finding a home. Like, we'd had that conversation, we got the contract signed. And then I also knew they had the 4 key power stats, right? So I know that this is like, it's my job to help them. And so, yeah, like in the beginning, there were moments too, like when we were having conversations where I'm like, what are you guys doing? Right. So it wasn't like all like, okay, let's try again. Like, there were moments where I'm like, you guys know you're acting against your interest rate now. Right. And like the fact that they ended up spending, 180 or 80K above what their initial goal was, or what, like almost 100,000 above what they could have got this place for, was just ridiculous to me at the time. But, so anyway, so I had the contract, we had the power stats, like there was a reason to keep working with these people. But it was also like what I realized at the end of this, and when they actually finally made their purchase, it was their process. Like, they had to go through that process, and they had to understand, like, sellers aren't just going to love it if you show up and lowball. You're not going to get a yes immediately on that. Like a lot of times people have to go through that process.
Yeah, so maybe the process is like, it's a learning process for these were first-time home buyers especially. They have to fail a little bit at first.
Yes.
And you have to be, this is a process where you build up your trust, you build up your expertise in how it's going to all work out.
Yeah.
You're predicting what the other side's going to do, you're telling them what's going to happen, and then it happens, and then you've built that trust. So this is just kind of a really elongated kind of version of that.
Yeah.
Hopefully that sales cycle isn't always as long as this one, but you knew they were making somewhat progress.
Well, look, and it makes it to the podcast because it's almost never as long as this one, right? I think the other thing too to remember is that, especially with first-time home buyers, they've got family in their ear and they're getting super confused. So I think there's like 2 things: mindset, right? So some people understand money and understand that getting what they want is like a good thing, and getting and being rewarded. I think sometimes when especially with first time home buyers, they've never really had, a lot of wealth building or a lot of time to build wealth, and they finally have like, $100,000 or $50,000 or whatever the amount is saved up. And that's a lot of money to them, and they're almost afraid to spend it, and they're almost like afraid to get what they want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas like sometimes when you're dealing with people who have had a few purchases or who have larger wealth portfolios, they're happy to go out and get what they want and like take advantage of the fact that they can secure good opportunities.
Right.
So I think it's a mindset thing a little bit as well.
Yeah, and sometimes those limiting beliefs can actually derail a process. So
yeah,
there are
big time.
There are moments where you have to evaluate if this is somebody you want to be continuing down this path with, or whether your time is, like you mentioned earlier, you still did a lot of deals within this period. I think, this whole thing took how long?
So this is like start to finish 6 months. I think I did 30 other deals while this was happening. And so it just like, it really shows how, efficiencies,
so you were checking in and leveraging what you could, but you weren't like, scouring MLS every morning for 2 hours just for this one client, right? You got leveraged with other clients as well.
100%.
Yeah. And so just on the point of who you decide to spend all this time with, a lot of our agents in our office, this is kind of a decent mindset, but they pick the clients based on, they're saying is 2 beers and a puppy.
Oh, yeah.
So if they could see themselves having 2 beers, not 1, but 2 beers with them, and if they would let them look after their puppy if they went out of town for the night, that's a decent person. That's someone you want to work with. That's maybe an ideal client. I know that for you, you're really looking for something that's a little bit more, someone that's signaling that they're serious. Like you mentioned, getting a buyer agency contract signed is a signal that they're serious. That's someone you want to be in business with. Maybe you don't want to hang out with them. Maybe you don't want to be best friends.
No.
But you do see them as a serious client.
Yeah. So I think especially when you're new, you feel like you have to like your clients. And I don't have that, right? Like I don't have the feeling of like I have to like everybody. I'm not saying I dislike my clients or anything like that, but I'm here to do business and like get a transaction done. And a lot of times I'm like agnostic to, and I have lots and lots of clients that I like, and it's not that I don't, but there's a point where I kind of shut it off and I'm like agnostic to the emotional piece of it. And I'm like, we're here for a purpose and we're here to help somebody achieve a goal. And it doesn't really matter that, it's just like, do we have the power stats? this is literally my filter. Do we have the power stats? And do we have a contract in place? Or, or how likely are they going to be to stick with me as the only agent, as their only agent? Beyond that, we don't have to like each other.
Right. So you're looking at the different criteria. So if you are, we say a lot in the industry that if you generate, you don't tolerate.
Yeah.
So if you're not serious, you can just move on, because we don't, as our business, we don't have a lead gen problem, right? We always have a lead gen problem, but we have a ton of leads coming in. There will be somebody else, like you said, you did 30 deals within that transaction process with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so do you want to expand on that further, the generate, don't tolerate?
I'm glad you brought that up, because, okay, everybody says that. We all heard it. We heard it a million times. Generate, don't tolerate, right? Like, get your ideal clients. So I kind of want to add my own twist to this for just a second, because this situation, most people that are talking generate, don't tolerate, are sort of preaching that, which I do 100% agree with. It is an important thing to have in your tool belt, or like
Sure.
tool to have, to be thinking about. But for me, like, these people were, as crazy as it sounds, because I know most people listening to this, or most agents listening to this, are gonna be like, just forget it, ditch them, generate, don't tolerate, right? But they weren't.
And we definitely had that conversation at the time.
And we have it lots, right? About a variety of things. But like, to me, this was like a generate, don't commiserate. Do you know what I mean? So, and I don't think anybody really says that, but it's like, you're there. When you're a realtor, you're sailing or the seas with your clients, right? You're like the captain of a ship. And your job is not to create the sea. It's not to create the weather. There's going to be storms. It's going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be all kinds of like factors. And your job is to navigate through that smoothly without getting stuck in their mud. Do you know what I mean? Because like where I see most new agents falter or like go crazy and riding that like real estate roller coaster with this kind of stuff is that they go down into the mud with them. They're like depressed when the client's depressed. And so like this, obviously, I don't know if we've highlighted this enough, so I'm going to say it one more time. It was a freaking emotional. Like the sellers were pissed off. Like when you say flipping what did you call it?
Contractual.
The contractual bird. I'm pretty sure there were actual birds being flipped at us with these offers. People were upset. People were disappointed. One party loved the property. The second party just wouldn't play ball. So there was like a relationship dynamic to navigate too, right? Like you've got two people. One of them really wants to just get in the place, and the other person's, can I say cock block on this thing? Because they're essentially cock blocking their partner from getting the place they want. You know what I mean? Anyway, so there's like all that emotion happening, and you're on like marathon phone calls. I mean, you're talking to them for like an hour. You know, this is like a big thing, this kind of negotiation. And I don't know if most people realize a lowball usually takes like 2 to 3 days to put together. It's not one of those things like, so if you get, if you write a lowball for your client, don't expect to hear back from the seller like later that day being like, okay, maybe never, like in this case, but don't expect to hear back from the seller like happy and like ready to go. They're often going to be like, thanks for the offer. We're going to sleep on it and we may get back to you. Right. And you have to be okay with the fact that you might not be at the negotiation table anymore. But anyway, so like that's all happening. All these emotions are happening, and you cannot get down in the mud. You need to go do the other deal while all that's still happening. And you can't absorb it. You can't absorb their emotion. So I say generate, don't commiserate, to kind of add to the generate, don't tolerate vibe.
Right. You threw in a lot of metaphors, sailing the seas and roller coasters and mud, but ultimately you stuck with them and right. Ended up with a happy transaction. And, they're valued clients now.
Yes.
Who refer to us, and they're great.
Totally.
It doesn't always go that way, but in this case, it worked out.
Yeah.
Our producer, Marion, just said, sometimes our hardest clients are the best referrers. And it's so true.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Because they've seen
point,
your value.
Yeah, they see the value. But I think also, you can't always expect it to be easy, right? So, I think that's what makes it hard is like, when do you decide to stick a difficult situation out with people versus when do you realize you got to walk away? Like, it's just not going to happen. And this was one of those times where it was like, the only way out is through. I think that's something you say all the time, right, Mar? The only way out of this was through, not just for me as the realtor, but for them as the people trying to get this done. They had to go through this like emotional process. And then I think at some point, as I was like kind of like reevaluating what the heck I'm doing, I was like, no, this is their process. And I had a moment of that, right? So there was like on the like analytical side, they had the stats, they had the buyer contract, but on the like emotional intelligence side of it, I knew that I realized that this was one of their it wasn't both of them, but one of their processes. And this person had to go through that to get on the other side of it and then feel okay with buying a place.
Yeah. So couple quick final points here. You talked about getting a buyer's agency contract signed by these folks, which helped make them sticky even when they had their frustrated moments. We don't have a 100% success rate on getting those signed, but and often if they have already signaled that they're serious in other ways, like when would you not feel like you wouldn't need one signed?
Okay, so first of all, I want to say like when you're sitting down to do your buyer presentation, you always want to ask for the contract, right? So yes, you can't control every time they're going to sign, but you can control every time you're going to ask. So it's important to still have like a process around that you do the same way every single time, right? So we have a really effective buyer presentation. And then we have a really great script, right? So leading into, and it feels natural and not salesy, right? So like if you've done your presentation well, the whole goal of booking the appointment is to have a seat, explain the process, explain what the clients can expect from you, what they can expect from your services, and then it's pretty natural to lead into the ask for, do you think I'm the right fit to work with you, and then get that paperwork signed. That's a pretty natural flow. I would say that if you do it in that way, you're going to at least increase the chances of having the buyer's agency signed. So as soon as I went to like a systemized way of like doing my presentation the same and then always asking, I didn't get it signed every time, but my ratio of getting the contract signed went up to about 75%. So 75% of the times I asked, I got it signed. There are times, though, where people say things like, you know what, I still want to interview other agents. So you've gone through that process and they want to interview another agent, or they're not 100% sure, like they want you to demonstrate your services. They're not totally sold just based off the presentation. That's usually where I find, if you're giving a solid presentation, where they're like, well, I want you to show me, don't tell me. And then sure. Right? And so there's a couple of tools that we have in that case. So like if you're gonna, so at this point, I just want to say you're faced with a business decision. There are agents out there that will not take people out unless they've signed the contract. They just don't feel comfortable, running their business that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. I found though that even if somebody didn't leave signing a contract that day, if they were willing to still keep the conversation going with me, that there were more opportunities to convert later on by keeping the relationship going. So I'm comfortable with that. So that's a personal decision. So then it's like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of agents will say, I'm not getting in the car with them unless I have a pre-approval for financing.
Yes.
Right? So, yes. But some are like that about buyer's agency contracts as well.
Totally, yeah. And we can definitely get into the pre-approval piece like another day, but exactly. And that's a business decision. There's nothing wrong with it. But for me, if they say, look, I'm not going to sign the contract today, but I like what I had to hear. Let me see you in action. That's an opportunity. That's another at bat, right? And I'm all about getting as many at bats as I can. So I'm going to go out and demonstrate. And then, I mean, to be honest, that remaining 25%, once we're in the field, once you're showing value, once you're adding value to their process, once you're in service of them and helping them reach their goals, the conversion rate goes right up to like, I want to say 95 to 98%, right? So that's kind of where I landed on conversion for that remaining 25%. So but even if you get a contract signed, you still need your 4 key power stats. That's really, really important, because just because they're going to keep giving you chances doesn't mean that they're the best person to spend your time with. And we often talk about, we classify leads. We have A leads, B leads, C leads. That's usually, how we do it. Some people say like hot, warm, cold, all that kind of stuff. But for me, if the lead's an A+, I'm going to keep wanting to, have opportunities to get in front of them and work with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe my final point here, I'll get you to talk about, is just the lowball strategy. Because I know, like, we've bought in several properties, and we always end up seeming to buy properties at list price.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes we'll go slightly over. We don't really lowball that much.
Oh, yeah.
But it just kind of depends on the property, right? And we're not buying the nicest properties, right? We're buying.
Well, it depends. Jeez. Greg, don't poo-poo all of our properties. But yeah, we did buy a lot of fixer-uppers and flips.
Generally.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to quote Warren Buffett here, and I'm going to say, I love this quote. I heard it about 2 months ago, and it's really stuck with me, and it describes it perfectly. Price is what you pay, value is what you get, right?
Sure.
And so for us, one thing that we've oftentimes had the best returns on our flips where we've actually paid asking or above asking. So like just thinking back now, 2 of our most successful house flips, one of them we paid asking, and then the second one we we competed for it and we paid above asking. And the reason for that is it was when you're like an in-tuned investor or like a relatively sophisticated or savvy buyer, you understand that. You understand price is what you pay, value is what you get, and you understand that sometimes securing the opportunity is more important than getting $10,000 or $15,000 off.
So with lowballs, this strategy obviously didn't work for these clients.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Sometimes it does, right?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just not a one size fits all solution.
Great.
And I know what's happening. You're at dinner. Your uncle and your dad are there. They each got $30,000 off of their property back in, 1996. And that's how you do real estate. There's so many reasons why you can't do it this way. I'm not going to overly nerd out on like stats and stuff, but I'm going to touch on it for a quick second. Like around North America and in my market in particular, where I'm at in like Western Canada, statistically, inventory levels have been decreasing over a 10-year period, right? So back after the aftermath of 2008, we had like in my particular market area 4,500 homes on the market, and that inventory has been dwindling over a 10-year period. We cannot get our inventory back up over 2,500 homes on market. We consistently can't replenish the housing demand that we have. And so you can't buy homes the way you used to when there was 45 or 5,000 homes on the market. It's just not even like a statistical reality. And there are deals and, things that you can like anomalies that you can pick at. But anyway, so, you're getting that advice. Your dad and your uncle are telling you how they did it back in the day. And you're,
right.
So yeah.
And I know you spend a lot of time training, and you can go off.
I can go on
lowball strategies for quite a while. But just in this case, the thing that they did wrong about a lowball strategy is they fell in love with the house that they wanted, and then they lowballed it. They shouldn't even be. Yeah. For us, generally, if you're going to lowball,
sure,
you don't even go see the houses. Like you're just looking at the math of it.
Yeah, most investors.
Because you can't fall in love, and I mean that way leads to tears, right?
Yeah. That path leads to tears.
Yeah.
I think that's how we should wrap this up. Not having realistic expectations, everybody acting against their own interest, being so emotional that you can't bring rationality into your negotiation leads to tears.
To break it down, what should a new agent do if they find themselves in that? Like, what's the biggest lesson, biggest takeaway here for you?
Yeah. Okay. So biggest takeaway, I'm probably going to do like 3 points here. So number 1, generate, don't commiserate. Help the people you need to help. Don't get down in the mud with them, and keep doing. Don't get so invested that it's emotionally drained you or mentally or energetically drained you to a point where you can't keep your volume up and you can't keep your lead generation up. So generate, don't commiserate while this is happening. Number 2, think long and hard about the quality of this lead. If they're still an A+ lead, you might have to pull out other tools to deal with them, but you will have to reevaluate the quality of this lead. In this case, buyer contract, all the power stats, A+ lead, figure it out, right? But the answer could be let them go. And then I think the third thing that you are going to have to sort of contend with is getting really, really strong in your get real conversations and understanding at every point in this process, if you continue down the path, what's happening and how do I navigate? How do I sail that sea with these people
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I thought your advice was gonna be, if you're a sea captain driving a roller coaster, watch out for mud. Is that right?
Always. If you're sea captain, yes, always.